The door slammed open, shattering the quiet hum of my pencil scratching across the sketchbook. My heart lurched as I spun around, expecting my roommate, Liam, but instead, a stranger stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the fading light of a Virginia sunset. His presence filled the room like a storm, unapologetic and raw, and I knew in that instant my life was about to change. I'm Ethan Carter, a junior at Willow Creek College, a small liberal arts school tucked in the rolling hills of Virginia. My days revolved around art classes, late-night coffee runs, and dodging the chaos of dorm life. I'd always been the quiet one, the guy who'd rather sketch the world than live loudly in it. My dorm room was my sanctuary, canvases stacked against the walls, fairy lights casting a warm glow, and the faint strum of my guitar when inspiration hit. Liam, my roommate, was the opposite, a loud, charming sociology major who thrived on late-night parties and debates about the meaning of life. We got along fine, but I kept to myself, content in my own world. Until that night. The stranger in the doorway was Caleb, Liam's older brother, who I'd only heard about in passing. Liam had mentioned him once or twice, a former high school football star who'd left town after some unspecified drama. Now, here he was, all leather jacket and sharp jawline, his dark eyes scanning the room like he owned it. "You Ethan?" he asked, voice low and gravelly, like he'd smoked one too many cigarettes. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, and you're?" "Caleb." He stepped inside without invitation, closing the door behind him. The air shifted, heavy with the scent of his cologne and something else. Danger, maybe, or just the weight of his presence. "Liam's out. Said I could crash here tonight." I blinked, trying to process. Liam hadn't mentioned anything about his brother visiting, let alone staying in our room. "He didn't tell me," I said, setting my sketchbook down, my fingers smudging charcoal across the page. Caleb shrugged, tossing a duffel bag onto Liam's bed. "He's not great with details." He moved with a kind of careless confidence, like he was used to bending the world to his will. I couldn't help but notice the way his jacket hugged his broad shoulders, or the faint scar above his eyebrow that caught the light. He was trouble, I could tell, but there was something magnetic about him, something that made it hard to look away. I forced myself to focus. "So, what's the deal? You just show up." He smirked, leaning against the desk, his fingers brushing the edge of my sketchbook. "Something like that. Needed a break from the city." Liam said, "This place is quiet." His eyes flicked to mine, holding my gaze a beat too long. "You don't look like you belong here either." I bristled, unsure if it was an insult or a compliment. "I'm fine here," I said, crossing my arms. "It's home for now." He raised an eyebrow, like he didn't quite believe me. "Home, huh? You don't strike me as the small-town type." I didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't wrong. Willow Creek sometimes felt like a cage, with its gossip and narrow-mindedness, but I wasn't about to admit that to a stranger. Instead, I changed the subject. "What's in the city that you're running from?" His smirk faded, just for a second, and I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. "Long story," he said, turning away to rummage through his bag. "You don't want to hear it." But I did. I didn't know why, but I wanted to know everything about this guy who'd just blown into my life like a hurricane. There was a story behind that scar, behind the way he carried himself like he was always ready to bolt. I opened my mouth to press further, but he cut me off. "Nice drawings," he said, flipping open my sketchbook without asking. My stomach dropped as he studied the pages, sketches of the campus, the river, and a few half-finished portraits of people I'd seen around town. His fingers lingered on a drawing of a guy sitting alone at a coffee shop, his face shadowed but unmistakably sad. "You're good," he said, and there was no mockery in his voice. "This guy looks like he's carrying the world." I swallowed, my cheeks burning. "It's just something I do." He looked up, his gaze piercing. "Don't sell yourself short, Ethan. This is real." The way he said my name sent a shiver down my spine. I wasn't used to people noticing me, let alone my art. Most people at Willow Creek saw me as the quiet kid who kept to himself, but Caleb was different. He saw me, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Caleb sprawled on Liam's bed, scrolling through his phone, while I tried to focus on my sketches. Every so often, I'd catch him watching me, his expression unreadable. When Liam finally stumbled in around midnight, reeking of cheap beer and grinning like an idiot, he didn't seem surprised to see Caleb. "Yo, you met my brother." Liam slurred, clapping Caleb on the shoulder. "He's a pain in the ass, but he's family." Caleb rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. I watched them banter, feeling like an outsider in my own room. But as the night wore on, and Liam passed out snoring, Caleb's eyes found mine again. "You ever feel like you're stuck, Ethan?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, then nodded. "All the time." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "Then maybe it's time to stop hiding." His words hit me like a punch. I didn't know what he meant, not exactly, but they stirred something deep inside me, a longing I'd buried for years, a truth I wasn't ready to face. That night, as I lay awake listening to the soft rhythm of Caleb's breathing across the room, I knew I was in trouble. Not because of him, but because of what he was waking up in me. The next morning, the dorm room felt different, like Caleb's presence had rewritten the air itself. I woke to find him already up, sitting cross-legged on Liam's bed, scribbling in a battered notebook. His dark hair fell over his eyes, and the early sunlight caught the sharp angles of his face, making him look almost unreal. "Morning," he said without looking up, his voice rough with sleep. "You sleep like the dead." I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the fog of last night's conversation. "Didn't mean to." "You're up early." He shrugged, closing the notebook with a snap. "Couldn't sleep. Too quiet around here." I wanted to ask about the notebook, about the city, about the weight he seemed to carry, but Liam's snoring interrupted my thoughts. Caleb smirked, nodding toward his brother. "He's always been like that. Could sleep through a tornado." I laughed, and for a moment, the tension between us eased. But it didn't last. Over the next few days, Caleb became a fixture in our dorm. Liam had invited him to stay for the week, citing some vague family obligation, but I could tell there was more to it. Caleb wasn't just visiting. He was escaping something. We fell into an uneasy rhythm. I'd sketch or study, while Caleb would sprawl on the couch, reading or tossing a football in the air. He'd make offhand comments about my drawings, always with that piercing intensity, like he was trying to unravel me. I caught myself watching him too, how his hands moved, how his laugh could shift from sharp to warm in a heartbeat. It was dangerous, this pull I felt, but I couldn't stop it. One afternoon, as rain battered the windows, Caleb suggested we grab coffee at the Rusty Mug, a local dive where the coffee was terrible, but the vibe was perfect. I hesitated. Being alone with him felt like stepping into a storm, but I agreed. We walked through the drizzle, sharing an umbrella that barely kept us dry. His shoulder brushed mine, and I pretended not to notice the heat it sent through me. Inside the cafe, we slid into a booth, the air thick with the smell of burnt coffee and wet leather. Caleb leaned back, studying me over his mug. "So, Ethan, what's your deal? You're always drawing, always in your head. What's the real story?" I shifted, uncomfortable under his gaze. "No story. Just trying to get through college." He didn't buy it. "Bullshit. You've got something going on in there." He tapped his temple, his eyes locked on mine. "Spill it." I took a sip of coffee to buy time. No one had ever pushed me like this, not even Liam. "I don't know," I said finally. "I guess I've always felt like I don't fit. Like I'm supposed to be someone else, but I don't know who." His expression softened, just for a moment. "Yeah, I get that." I waited, hoping he'd say more, but he didn't. Instead, he pulled out his notebook and slid it across the table. "Here, your turn." I opened it, my breath catching. The pages were filled with poetry, raw, jagged lines about loss, freedom, and a city that chewed people up. It was beautiful and brutal, and it made me see Caleb in a new light. "You wrote this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, looking almost shy. "Don't laugh. I'm not. It's incredible. I meant it." His words were like my sketches, snapshots of a soul laid bare. That night, back in the dorm, I couldn't stop thinking about him. About the way he'd looked at me, like he saw the parts of me I'd hidden even from myself. I'd never told anyone I was gay. Not Liam, not my family, not even myself, not out loud. But Caleb's presence was pulling that truth to the surface, and it terrified me. When Liam left for a weekend trip with his sociology club, Caleb and I were alone in the dorm. The air felt charged, like the calm before a lightning strike. We ordered pizza, watched a bad action movie, and laughed until my sides hurt. But as the night wore on, the laughter faded, and the silence grew heavy. "Ethan," he said suddenly, turning to face me on the couch. "Why do you stay here? In this town, in this life? You're bigger than this place." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. "It's safe," I admitted. "I don't know how to be anything else." He leaned closer, his knee brushing mine. "Safe's overrated. You're hiding who you are, and it's killing you." His words cut deep, exposing a truth I'd buried for years. I wanted to argue, to push him away, but instead, I felt tears prick my eyes. "You don't know me," I whispered. "I know enough," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I see you, Ethan, and I'm not going anywhere." The dorm was too quiet without Liam's usual chaos, and Caleb's words hung in the air like smoke. "I see you, Ethan." I couldn't shake them, couldn't stop the way they made my chest ache with something I didn't dare name. I stood abruptly, muttering about needing air, and fled to the balcony. The night was cool, the stars sharp against the Virginia sky. Caleb followed, leaning against the railing beside me, his silence louder than any words. I wanted to ask him what he meant, why he cared, but fear kept me quiet. I'd spent so long hiding, building walls around the truth of who I was, that the idea of letting someone in felt like stepping off a cliff. "You're thinking too hard," Caleb said, his voice cutting through the night. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face. "Just say it, whatever it is." I gripped the railing, my knuckles white. "I don't know what you want from me." He exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes never leaving mine. "I want you to stop pretending. You're not just some quiet art kid. There's more to you, and you're scared to let it out." My throat tightened. He was right, and it hurt. "You don't get it," I said, my voice shaking. "This town, my family. They'd never accept me if they knew." "Knew what?" he pressed, stepping closer. His voice was gentle but relentless, like he was peeling back my layers one by one. I couldn't say it. The word, gay, felt like a bomb I'd been carrying my whole life, waiting to detonate. Instead, I turned away, staring at the distant lights of Willow Creek. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," he said, his hand brushing my arm. The touch was electric, and I flinched, not because I didn't want it, but because I wanted it too much. "I can't," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm not like you. I'm not brave." Caleb laughed, but it wasn't cruel. "Brave? I'm a mess, Ethan. I left home because I couldn't face my own shit. But you—" He paused, his hand lingering on my arm. "You're stronger than you think." I turned to face him, and for the first time, I really looked at him, not just the leather jacket or the scar, but the vulnerability in his eyes. He wasn't the invincible bad boy I'd thought. He was broken, just like me, and somehow that made it easier to speak. "I'm gay," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. They felt heavy, real, like they'd been waiting years to be spoken. My heart raced, waiting for his reaction, for the rejection I'd always feared. Caleb didn't flinch. He just nodded, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Okay," he said simply. "That's who you are? Doesn't change a thing." I stared at him, stunned. "You don't care?" "Why would I?" he said, flicking his cigarette away. "I've known since the moment I saw you. The way you look at the world, the way you draw, it's all you, Ethan. And it's beautiful." My breath caught, and for a moment, I thought I might cry. No one had ever said anything like that to me. Not my parents, not my friends, no one. I felt exposed, but also free, like a weight had lifted. We stood there in silence, the night wrapping around us. Then, without warning, Caleb reached out and pulled me into a hug. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was everything I needed, warm, steady, real. I let myself sink into it, my face pressed against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The next few days were a blur of stolen moments. Caleb and I talked for hours, about his poetry, my art, the lives we wanted but were too scared to chase. He told me about the city, about the boyfriend he'd loved and lost, about the fights with his parents that drove him away. I told him about my fear of coming out, about the sketches I hid because they were too personal. We were different, but we understood each other in a way I'd never thought possible. One night, we ended up at the river, a quiet spot where I sometimes went to draw. The water reflected the stars, and Caleb read me one of his poems, his voice low and raw. When he finished, I kissed him. It was impulsive, terrifying, but it felt right. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then hungry, and for a moment, the world disappeared. But reality came crashing back. As we pulled apart, I saw a figure in the distance. Liam, standing frozen, his face a mix of shock and betrayal. Liam's eyes burned into us, and my stomach dropped. The river's gentle rush was the only sound as he turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy on the gravel path. I wanted to chase after him, to explain, but my feet were rooted to the ground. Caleb's hand found mine, squeezing gently, but it didn't ease the panic clawing at my chest. "I need to talk to him," I said, my voice barely steady. Caleb nodded, his expression unreadable. "Go. I'll be here." I ran after Liam, my heart pounding. I found him back at the dorm, pacing the room like a caged animal. His face was a storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion. "What the hell, Ethan?" he snapped as I walked in. "My brother? Really? It's not like that," I said, though the words felt weak. "I didn't plan this." "Didn't plan it?" He laughed, but it was bitter. "You're kissing my brother by the river, and you expect me to believe it just happened?" I flinched, the truth of his words cutting deep. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm figuring myself out." Liam stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping. "You're gay," he said, not a question but a statement. I nodded, bracing for the worst. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was scared," I admitted. "This town, my family, they'd never understand. I didn't know how you'd take it." He looked at me, his anger softening into something sadder. "I'm your friend, Ethan. I would have had your back." The weight of his words hit me hard. I'd spent so long hiding, assuming the worst, that I'd never given Liam a chance. "I'm sorry," I said again, and this time, I meant it for everything, for hiding, for lying, for the mess I'd made. Liam sighed, sitting on his bed. "Caleb's not easy, you know. He's got baggage. More than you realize." "I know," I said, thinking of the poetry, the scar, the way Caleb carried his pain like a second skin. "But he sees me, really sees me." Liam studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Just be careful, okay? He's my brother, but he's not good at staying." I didn't know what to say to that. The rest of the night was tense, but Liam didn't push me away. We didn't talk about Caleb, or the kiss, or the truth I'd finally spoken. But something had shifted, and I knew things would never be the same. Over the next few days, Caleb and I grew closer, but the shadow of Liam's warning hung over us. We stole moments when we could, late-night talks on the balcony, walks by the river, his hand brushing mine in a way that made my heart race. But there was a restlessness in him, a tension I couldn't ignore. He'd disappear for hours, coming back with red-rimmed eyes or a forced smile. I wanted to ask, but I was afraid of the answers. One evening, as we sat on the dorm roof, watching the town lights flicker below, Caleb told me about his ex, Marcus. "He was everything," he said, his voice low. But I screwed it up. Couldn't handle being honest with myself, let alone him. I listened, my heart aching for him. "What happened?" "He wanted more than I could give," Caleb said, staring at the horizon. I ran, like I always do. I reached for his hand, intertwining our fingers. "You're not running now." He looked at me, his eyes soft but guarded. "Don't count on that, Ethan. I'm not good at staying." His words stung, but I pushed them aside. I wanted to believe we could be different, that I could be enough to make him stay. But deep down, I knew he was warning me, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. The days blurred together, each one a mix of hope and dread. Caleb and I were falling into something real, something that scared me as much as it thrilled me. We'd kiss in the shadows of the dorm, his hands warm on my skin, his breath a whisper against my lips. But every moment felt fragile, like it could shatter with one wrong move. Liam kept his distance, not cold, but cautious, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I couldn't blame him. Caleb's presence was a wildfire, beautiful but dangerous, and I was caught in its path. I started sketching him, his eyes, his hands, the way he looked when he thought no one was watching. Each drawing felt like a confession, a way to hold on to him before he slipped away. One night, Caleb showed up at the dorm with a split lip and a bruised cheek. My stomach twisted as I grabbed a wet cloth to clean him up. "What happened?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Got into it with some guy at a bar," he said, wincing as I dabbed at his lip. "Didn't like the way he was talking." "About you?" I asked, my heart sinking. "About us," he said, his eyes meeting mine. Heard him mouthing off about the queer kids on campus. I couldn't let it slide. I froze, the cloth slipping from my hand. Willow Creek wasn't exactly progressive, but I'd always kept my head down, avoiding trouble. Caleb, though, he didn't back down. "You didn't have to do that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, I did," he said, his jaw tight. "No one gets to talk about you like that." My chest ached, torn between gratitude and fear. I wanted to be brave like him, to stand up and not care what anyone thought, but the thought of the town knowing my truth made me sick. "What if it gets worse?" I asked. "What if they come after us?" "Then we deal with it," he said, his hand finding mine. "Together." But it wasn't that simple. The next day, whispers followed me around campus. People stared, their eyes sharp with judgment. A group of guys in the dining hall laughed too loudly when I walked by, and I heard the word fag hissed under their breath. I kept my head down, but inside, I was unraveling. Caleb noticed. That night, he pulled me onto the balcony, his hands framing my face. "Don't let them get to you," he said, his voice fierce. "You're more than this town, Ethan. More than their bullshit." I wanted to believe him, but the fear was suffocating. "What if I'm not strong enough?" I whispered. "You are," he said, kissing me softly. "You just don't know it yet." For a moment, I let myself believe him. But later that night, I found his notebook open on the desk, a new poem scrawled in jagged handwriting. It was about running, about freedom, about leaving everything behind. My heart sank as I read it. The words a reminder of what Liam had said. He's not good at staying. I confronted him the next morning, my voice trembling. "Are you leaving?" I asked, holding up the notebook. He froze, his eyes dark with guilt. "I don't know," he admitted. "I never stay anywhere long. It's who I am." "But you said—" I stopped, my throat tight. "You said you saw me. Was that a lie?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "It's the truest thing I've ever felt. But I'm not good for you, Ethan. You deserve someone who can stay, who can give you everything." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "I don't want someone else. I want you." He looked at me, his face a battleground of emotions. Then he kissed me, hard and desperate, like he was trying to pour everything he couldn't say into that one moment. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I'm trying," he whispered. "For you, I'm trying." Caleb's promise to try kept me afloat, but the cracks in our world were growing. The town's whispers turned into shouts, graffiti on the dorm walls, slurs scrawled in marker. I tried to ignore it, to focus on Caleb's hand in mine, but the hate was suffocating. Liam did his best to shield me, shutting down anyone who talked shit in his presence, but even he couldn't stop the tide. One night, we went to a party off campus, hoping for a break from the tension. The house was packed, music pounding, and for a while, it felt like we could be normal. Caleb's arm was around my shoulders, his laugh warm in my ear. But then I saw them, a group of guys from the dining hall, their eyes locked on us. One of them, a burly senior named Trent, shoved through the crowd, his face twisted with disgust. "Faggots," he spat, loud enough for the room to hear. The music didn't stop, but the air did, everyone turning to watch. Caleb stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Say it again," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Trent smirked, stepping closer. "You heard me. This town doesn't want your kind." I grabbed Caleb's arm, trying to pull him back, but he shook me off. "Caleb, don't," I pleaded, but it was too late. Trent swung, and Caleb ducked, landing a punch that sent Trent staggering. The room erupted, people shouting, pulling them apart. I dragged Caleb outside, my heart racing, his knuckles bloody. "Why do you do this?" I yelled, my voice breaking. "You're going to get hurt." He wiped the blood on his jeans, his eyes blazing. "I'm not letting them win, Ethan. Not them, not this town, not anyone. But it's not worth it," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "You're going to get yourself killed, and then what? I lose you." He froze, his anger softening. "You won't lose me," he said, pulling me close. "I'm right here." But I didn't believe him, not completely. The fight at the party was a wake-up call. Willow Creek wasn't safe. Not for us, not like this. I started researching other schools, other towns, places where we could be ourselves without fear. Caleb listened, but his eyes were distant, like he was already halfway out the door. One night, as we lay in my bed, his head on my chest, I told him about my dream. A little apartment somewhere, with a studio for my art and a desk for his poetry. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sounds nice," he said, but his voice was hollow. The next morning, I woke to find his side of the bed empty. His notebook was gone, his duffel bag too. My heart stopped as I found a note on the desk, his handwriting shaky but clear. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I want to stay, but I don't know how. You're braver than me, braver than I'll ever be. Don't let this town break you. Caleb." I sank to the floor, the note crumpled in my hand. He was gone, just like Liam had warned, just like his poems had promised. The dorm felt empty, the fairy lights cold, my sketches lifeless without him. I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was loss. Liam found me there, his face softening when he saw the note. "I'm sorry, man," he said, sitting beside me. "I knew he'd do this." I nodded, unable to speak. But as the days passed, something shifted inside me. Caleb's leaving hurt, but it also woke me up. I wasn't the scared kid hiding in my sketches anymore. I was someone who'd loved, who'd fought, who'd survived. Months passed, and Willow Creek began to feel like a memory of someone else's life. I threw myself into my art, channeling the pain of Caleb's absence into every stroke. My sketches grew bolder, more honest, portraits of love and loss that won me a scholarship to an art school in New York. Liam stood by me, his friendship a quiet anchor, and slowly, I started to heal. I never heard from Caleb, but his notebook haunted me, its words etched in my mind. I carried it with me when I moved to the city, a reminder of the boy who'd changed everything. New York was overwhelming, vibrant, a world where I could be myself without fear. I came out to my new friends, then to my family, bracing for their rejection but finding quiet acceptance instead. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. One spring evening, as I walked through Washington Square Park, sketchbook in hand, I saw him. Caleb, sitting on a bench, his hair longer, his leather jacket worn but unmistakable. My heart stopped, but I kept walking, unsure if I was ready to face him. He saw me first, his eyes widening. "Ethan," he said, standing, his voice soft with wonder. "You're here." I nodded, my throat tight. "I got out. Like you said." He smiled, but it was sad, tinged with regret. "I'm proud of you," he said, stepping closer. "I read about your scholarship. Your art, it's everywhere." I swallowed, the old ache flaring. "Why'd you leave, Caleb? You didn't even say goodbye." He looked away, his hands in his pockets. "I was scared," he admitted. "You were so sure, so ready to fight for us. I didn't think I could keep up." "You could have tried," I said, my voice breaking. "I loved you." His eyes met mine, raw and unguarded. "I loved you too. Still do." The words hung between us, heavy with everything we'd lost. I wanted to be angry, to walk away, but instead, I stepped closer. "Then don't run this time," I said, my voice steady. "Stay? Fight for us." He hesitated, then nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I'll try," he whispered, and this time I believed him. We didn't fall back into each other's arms, not right away. It was slow, careful, like rebuilding a house after a storm. But we talked, laughed, shared coffee and poetry and sketches. New York became our canvas, a place to start over, to be the men we'd always wanted to be. Caleb's leaving had broken me, but it also set me free. It taught me to fight for myself, for love, for the life I deserved. And as we stood in the park, the city alive around us. I knew that night in Willow Creek had changed everything forever, not because it was perfect, but because it was ours.